just speaking about how divining and even so many things just get a bad rap, because of the connotations and even the culture in which we live, how it's depicted, divination, like it's this spooky, negative, bad thing, when it's something that indeed, we see the priest doing, and they are not specifically, they don't use the cup to divine, they use the urim and the tumim, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was a, a great a great wrap up and a lot to think about. And like you said, a lot of layers, even the more you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as we know, especially in our Zoharic writings, the writings of Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, especially the writings of the Arizal, we know again everything is in everything. The inner, the inner of external, the upper of the upper, the lower of the lower. That's actually what I wanted to touch on with the Pantheon of the Partzufim. So that's a beautiful place to start speaking about this extended metaphor or this microcosm of the macrocosm and the microcosm of the microcosm of the diviner's cup. And Yosef HaTzadik, even as Yesod, is itself a vessel or a channel. And to be a diviner is to be a channel for consciousness, that light, wisdom, understanding, and vision, all of this being light itself, even messages transmitted as light. We can even think even of the Morse code system, like messages transmitted as sound, which is a frequency, which is itself a form of light. So any type of communication or message or vision that you're receiving is light. It's Ora Himself. It's the Ashe, it's the vital force, it's the Chi, all of this. And so being a vessel for that, like I've said many times before, we're all vessels. We just have to know who and what we're being a vessel for in that moment and from which side it comes from. The extended metaphor of the actual physical cup in his hand, the goblet, the chalice, and that itself, the myth of the Holy Grail, even extends to that womb like wisdom, that hidden wisdom in this cup. And I love how you even brought up the Kiddush cup, the Kiddush bringing down that light of Shabbat, which again, Shabbat being the feminine, the Kiddush cup itself being the feminine vessel of these mysteries of the sod, the wine being linked with the sod. So to dive into and reveal those mysteries in that cup, in that vessel, that hidden place, is the role of the diviner, him or herself as a vessel, and then using tools, usually vessels themselves, to divine these messages. And everything, to an extent, is a vessel. Many diviners use tools such as the divining bowl, the scrying bowl, even the crystal ball. That's an igul. That's a feminine vessel. Um, I mean, I could really go into so much depth, but I love this trajectory. I wish I was there for the end of that conversation. My mind is like firing off right now in many different places. But yeah, thank you for that. I have to go back and watch the end of the recording. But a beautiful way to
Right.
transition into what I wanted to touch on today for our reading of Shaar HaPesukim, speaking of Yosef HaTzadik and Yesod, and uh, even Yaakov as that Tiferet, that middle pillar. So before I actually read the text, what I was hoping to elucidate is the idea of the pantheon of sorts that we do have in the Torah of our Partzufim. And pantheon can be somewhat of a controversial word, As we know, there's so much fear around the idea of idolatry and avodah zarah and paganism, which, by the way, pagan literally just means country folk. And even heathen, we've associated heathen with some kind of witchcraft or some kind of uncivilized person. Literally, the heathens are the people of the north, the northern people, the Norse Proto Germanic people, and their cultural beliefs about their cosmogony and cosmology, their pantheon of deities, including Odin and Freyja and Thor, and all the ones who have been um, commercialized as the Avengers nowadays. At the root, it literally just refers to rural people, the country folk, the people who lived off the land, the wisdom of the people who lived off the land. And I spoke about in the Nida limud about that archetypal imagery of the country versus the city and what is lost when you disconnect from the land, which is the true wealth and inheritance. The land is always the place of abundance, the place of ancestry, the place of history. And that connection to the land is so important. And when you come out of that into the city, you come into the place of covetousness. You come into a marketplace where things are now no longer being grown organically. And we can literally make that into so many different ways and levels of understanding, but things are no longer being grown and cultivated, just like Adam was called to till the ground, to cultivate something. Even education used to mean to cultivate the mind and the character. Now it's become an institution. Again, in industrialization and urbanization, quote unquote education is now nothing more than indoctrination and really uh, creating model citizens as model prisoners or enslavement, the school to prison pipeline. But I digress. But the city and the country juxtaposition is understanding the cost of that disconnect from the land when you then make everything to be commodified and materialized and commercialized as industrialized. And so, again, we're so, unfortunately, as a collective in our community, especially, we're so afraid of words like pagan and heathen, and we really don't even, as a collective, define what they really mean. Europeanization and European Christianization specifically has brought us to a place to associate civilization with industrialization, which includes the industrialization and monopolization of the written word through the printing press and through, again, commercializing what is read, politicizing what is read and disseminated. So then sacred text and even the sacredness of oral tradition then becomes a distortion when you have places like the Vatican storing up all the authentic sacred texts and then controlling what can be read and how it is translated and transmitted. And then again, going into politics where we now live in this Orwellian dystopian like 1984, where even the written word can't be trusted. Journalism is compromised. Everything is for the corporations. Coming back to this understanding of the pantheon, we can often be so ambivalent to see a pantheon in our Torah tradition when in fact there is one in a manner of speaking. We think of pantheon, we think of Mount Olympus and the Greek gods, we think of the Orisha, the Loa, entities like this. But in fact, we can speak of the 12 Partzufim in this organization of emanations of Ein Sof. And so this is what this text will be going into today. So we have to remember fundamentally and foundationally that YHWH is not a name. It's not just this God is YHWH. It's not a name. The letters represent dimensions. As we've gone over before, the Yod is Atzilut, the Hey Beriya, Wav Yetzira, and the Hey Asiya. And the hidden fifth Olam is the crown of the Yod, which is Adam Kadmon. To break down further, of course, the Yod is Atzilut as Abba. The Hey, the upper Hey, is Beriya as Ima. The Vav is Yetzira as the lower six, which is again Zeirampin, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. We have to remember Hakadosh Baruch Hu is not synonymous with Ein Sof. And this Vav, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, this Yetzira, is made up of the six lower Sephirot we call Gachat and Nachi. Gevura, or Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. The Za, Zierampin. Also called elsewhere Tiferet and Yaakov. And the lower Hay, again, as I always talk about, is Asiya as Nukva, the wife of Zierampin, Malkut, Shekinah. So these are the illuminations, the emanations of Ein Sof. The concept of the Tzimtzum that we talk about is the act of creating the Or Ein Sof from the Halal, through the Kav, which I talked about in the Nida limud yesterday or the day before, where the Kav, Lamed, is the Kav. Lamed is this androgynous Yashar and Igul, masculine and feminine channel or pipe. Kav is the literal Kaf, the letter Kaf, and Vav, the Kaf, the 26. So we have this Kav, this pipe that draws down the Or Ein Sof from the Halal, and that is the act of birthing the 10 Sefirot. Of course, we say 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11, but each has an upper and lower dimension. And when they have the role of bringing up light, they are defined as Partzufim, not Sefirot or Olamot. So we can start with the Yod of Yod Ke Vav Ke is the Olam Atzilut, and it comprises of Keter and Chokmah. And Keter is comprised of Arik Anpin and Atik Yomin. Chokmah is comprised of Abba and the lower aspect as Israel Sabah. Then we have Bina. The upper aspect is Ima Ila'a, and the lower aspect is Tevuna. Then we have the Vav, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Zianapin, the Olam of Yetzirah, the Chagat Nachiyi, Chesed Gevura Tiferet, Netzach Hod Yesod. Tiferet itself has an upper and lower dimension, which we'll see in this text as I continue to read. And so the Za itself as a whole is divided into dimensions. Yisrael as the Chagat, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, and Yaakov as Nahi, Netzachod, and Yesod, upper and lower. And even Malkut is also divided in upper and lower. The top, the highest, being Leah, the hidden, also corresponding with Lilith, but that's another story. And the bottom with Rachel, the lower aspect with Rachel. So it's important to understand this delineation as we continue to read. So we'll just dive right into the text now. There's two. The cause of causes, which in the Siddur, we usually read this as the Ilat Ha'ilot. What's also interesting is when we say the Seyudot, the Seyudah of each of our meals of Shabbat, we have first, second, third, and fourth meal. Each meal invites a different partsuf to the table, basically. So we'll see in the translations the cause of causes, the ilat ha'ilot. We'll literally, if you read it in the Siddur, we'll see Zerampin, Atik Yomim. All these different levels are literally called in our Seder. Each meal focuses or presences a different partsuf. Cause of causes. All the blemishes mentioned will now be explained well. So remember last time we talked about the sin of Adam HaRishon. It is written in Sefer HaTikunim that his sin was that he caused darkness between Ilat HaIlot, or the uppermost cause, the cause of causes, and the Keter. They speak of the Keter as the spark, the will to create, which comes from the darkness. Which I've been thinking, I was reading something about an experiment. A few days ago, I was reading about an experiment in which they locked these men in a dark room, a sensory deprivation chamber, and all of them went crazy except one. And the one who didn't go crazy, he spoke out loud to himself, which is interesting when we even think of the story of the four in the orchard, the four who went to Pardes, and all of them basically went crazy in one way or another, or as the story is usually told. There is obviously much more nuance to it, which would be very surprising, but we'll go into that another time. But the one who was said to have made it out okay was Rabbi Akiba. And I think when we speak of the power of utterance, as far as our consciousness and keeping our awareness alive through speech, it makes me think of the utterances of creation. We create as we speak. Abracadabra, abaracadabra. So that was an interesting correlation. And when we think of the will to live, the will to connect to something, that you have to create something to connect with, even if it's a reflection of yourself. So if you think about yourself in a dark, isolated place, you speak to yourself to let you know that there's something to connect with, even if it's an extension of yourself. So there's so much research about even, old people, when one of their spouses dies, they lose the will to live, the importance of touch, even for babies. I saw a long time ago a nurse, she was like this whistleblower, and she spoke about places in the hospital where they literally have rooms where they put babies to die. And that lack of human touch causes the baby to not have the will to live, that isolation again. So even when you seem to be alone in this place of darkness, you create something to connect with through your own utterance. And we know sound is quantifiable as light to an extent. It's a vibration, it's a frequency, it's an electricity. So when we speak of that spark, keter, the hard spark, that was the will, I don't want to say will to live, but divine will, period. Divine will overall. So this, back to the text, this is understood from what is written in Sefer HaZohar in Parashat Bereshit. Let me turn the page. Okay. In Sefer HaZohar in Parashat Bereshit, there are upper causes and there is a cause above all causes. The idea is this. Ein Sof is higher than Atik Yomin in the world of Atzilut. and it is called the cause of causes, being the first cause. All other causes are from it. It gives them existence. Any cause below the cause of all causes are just called a cause because they are the result of and emanate from Ein Sof. On a more specific level, each lower cause can be called a cause of causes since they cause all causes below them. Therefore, each is considered to be the cause of that which it causes below. But the ultimate cause of all causes is Ein Sof, as mentioned. Thus, for example, Ima, right, Ima Ila'a, the mother of causes, is the cause of causes with respect to Zeranpin. As mentioned, this is because it causes all the causes in Zeranpin. I was about to say something, but I'll just let the text inform itself. Remember, mother is the first crown. I'll say that. There is an important principle to know regarding the Zohar. If it mentioned a name of Havaya or of Sephira in Sefer HaZohar, it is crucial to know on which level it is talking, and this is one such example. So again, everything is in everything. So all 10 Sefirot are in each Sefirot. So you could say Malkut, but what Malkut? The Malkut of Tiferet, the Malkut of Chokmah, the Malkut of Gevura, um, even Chavaya, the divine name itself. Which one? The one in Asiya? The one in Beriah? So always keep that in mind. There are many Ketarim, but this Keter mentioned in Sefer HaTzikunim is the Keter of Zeir Ampin. It was with respect to this one that Adam Harishon sinned, creating darkness between the Keter of Zeir Ampin and Ima. Creating darkness between the Keter of Zeir Ampin and Ima, the cause of causes, with respect to Zeir Ampin. The first blemish. This darkness resulted when the Keter of Zer was increased to the size of the lower two-thirds of the Tiferet of Ima, but the light inside, however, was not able to increase accordingly. Had it been after the brains of Abba had entered the head of Zeir Ampin, then two-thirds of the light of the Tiferet of Ima would have been able to serve the Keter of Zer. Mm, okay. Instead, it only had a third of the light of the Tiferet of Ima, the last level of them. The vessel of the Keter itself, however, was much larger than two-thirds, leaving the vessel of the Keter of Zer very dark, lacking the light to illuminate all of it. That is the top one-third that Adam added. There was darkness in the upper third of Keter of Zer, and this darkness separated between the Keter of Zer and the upper Ima. This was one blemish. The second blemish. The second blemish is written in Sefer HaZohar that he sinned with respect to the female. And y'all gotta let me know if I gotta zoom in. I didn't think about that. Um, doo-doo-doo. Hopefully that's better.
And it's good. I had also zoomed in myself, so it was okay.
Oh, okay. The second blemish is written in Sefer HaZohar that he sinned with respect to the female. It is known that the vessel of the Keter of the Nukva of Zeir Anpin is the bottom two-thirds of the Tiferet of Zer. So remember, the Keter is built by the Nahi. So again, as everything is in everything, everything below, like every Sephira below a Sephira is built from the Nahi of the one above it, which makes sense when we think of it in terms of a body, the two thighs and the Yesod, the act of Yikud, the act of procreation, the strength, whether male or female, comes from the two thighs and the yesod, the reproductive organ. That is the place of emanation, the place of birth. So everything below is birthed from this bottom half. So one's crown, just like a baby crowns. And even in the masculine sense, the head of the seed comes from the head of the yesod. So you're still seeing an exit, an emanation of a head, a crown, a consciousness that is built from the yesod through the strength of the netzach and the hold of that above it. It is known that the vessel of the keter of the nukva of Zeranpin is the bottom two-thirds of the tiferet of Zer. The light of the keter of the nukva, however, is only half that light, just the bottom third of the tiferet of Zer. And remember, there is an upper and a lower tiferet. When Adam increased the vessel of the keter of Zer to double its light, because all vessels can be expanded. But then the question then should be, well, why did the vessels shatter? We have to continue to build on that as we go. When Adam increased the vessel of the Keter of Zer to double its light, he weakened the strength of Zer Anpin, which is male, and made it like the female. The vessel of the Keter was large, but the light inside it was little. He returned it to the level of the Keter of the female, and in this way he sinned with respect to the female. The third blemish. The third blemish was also caused to the Da'at of Zer Anpin. It was explained previously that it is appropriate for the da'at to be below in the body of Zer. Because when it flowed from Abba, it was from the level of the da'at that emanated through the 6 points. But the light in the vessel of his keter drew it up and elevated it because the keter and the da'at are in the kav emtsai, the middle line, which is a measure of moderation or unity, that by which moderation is delineated and unity is defined. Just as we speak of the middle pillar as the place of moderation between Kesed and Gebura, Tiferet, between Chokmah and Bina, Da'at. Now the light of the Keter was darkened. It didn't have the strength to illuminate. Let me go to the next page. Now the light, now that the light of the Keter was darkened, it didn't have the strength to illuminate in its place. And how much more it did not have strength to illuminate the Da'at and elevate it. As a result, the Da'at of Zanampin from the side of Ima fell below to the upper third of Tiferet until the chest, between the two shoulders of the two arms of Chesed and Gevurah. It was distanced from the two brains of Chokmah and Bina that illuminated it. Since the brain of Da'at fell into the body, it was no longer considered a brain, and the Kitzonim could latch onto it. So much is being said here. As mentioned before, this was especially so while the brains of Abba, which completely eliminate the latching on of the Kitzonim, were not yet there. This was a great blemish, since the Kitzonim could latch on even to the root of the brain of Da'at itself and cause a mixture of good and evil there as well. Our rabbis hinted to this in Sefer HaZohar in the opinion that the sin of Adam HaRishon was that he ate from the Eitz HaDa'at Tov Ura. The fourth blemish. The fourth blemish regarding the Eitz HaDa'at Tov Ura was as follows. While the brain of Da'at was above in the head in the third compartment of the skull, a very narrow place, the Chasadim and Gevurot that comprised it were joined together as one. And the Gevurot were scented, I prefer perfumed. The Gevurot were perfumed and sweetened, thus tempering the harshness by the Chasadim. But after the Da'at descended to a wider place, the lights had room to emanate, and the Chasadim spread through the right shoulder, and the Geburot through the left shoulder. This was especially so given what was explained in the introduction to the commentary on the Idras of Parshat Ha'atzinu, that the Chassidim, which was actually my birth Parsha, whoop whoop, that the Chassidim and the Gemurah of the Da'at of Zeir Anpin are the level of the two shoulders of Arik Anpin. Therefore, they emanated throughout the place that was fitting for them according to their levels in the two shoulders of Zeir Anpin. And the Gevurot were no longer perfumed by the Chassidim. This increased Dinim judgments and allowed the Kitzonim to latch on, and is included in the eating of the Eitz Hada'at Tov Urah. All right, the fifth blemish. The fifth blemish was to the rest of the body of Zeir Anpin, since the Da'at brain is clothed in the Yesod of Iman. While the Da'at was above, the Yesod of Ima was also above. The level of the Malkut of Ima, which is her Ateret HaYesod, the crown of the Yesod, very vivid imagery, which is her Ateret HaYesod, was in the upper third of the Tiferet of Zer until the chest. After the Da'at brain descended, his vessel, the Yesod of Ima, descended with him one entire Sephirah. Originally, the Yesod was higher up in the Da'at, and the Atara, which is the elevated Malkut, Hadara, the crown of splendor, as it is said, the wife is the crown of her husband. The Atara was in the upper third of Tiferet. Now the Yesod of Ima was lower and in the Tiferet of Zer, and her Atara descended to the upper third of the Yesod of Zeir Anpin. This was a great blemish to the entire body of Zeir Anpin. Originally, the bottom two-thirds of the Tiferet, the Netzach, and the Hod of Zer were on the level of revealed lights. Not only this, but the first three Sephirah of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at also received a great illumination from these revealed lights, as has been explained. Looking for this footnote. Okay. These revealed Chasadim descended strongly when they left the mouth of the Yesod of Ima, which ends at the chest, and going down to the Yesod of Zer, they hit it strongly. As a result, they bounced back with great force, Besod Or Choser, in the secret of Or Choser, returning light, through the three lines of Sephirot. The right line includes Chokhmah, Chesed, and Netzach. The left line includes Bina, Gebura, Hod, and Malkut. And the middle light, the Sephirot of Keter or Da'at, Tiferet, and Yesod. Now, the obvious question would be, but I thought Malkut was in the middle as well, under Yesod. We would understand this as we go along. Of course, understanding that the left side is the feminine side. But even that is relative, because if I'm looking at you, what I consider to be your left is not your left in your body. The left side of a body from someone looking from outside the body is not the left of the one inside its body. And remember, inner and outer, what is most inner is higher. And that is what is hidden, and that is the feminine. So, another hint about the left side that we associate with Kevura, Dinim, and all of these other things. So again, as a result, they bounced back with great force in the secret of Or Hoser, returning line through the three lines of Sefirot and illuminate up to the first three themselves. But now there was no revelation to these lights, the Sefirot of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, except the bottom two-thirds of the Yesod of Zer. The Atara of Ima had descended to the upper one-third, concealing the lights. From that point and higher, there was tremendous darkness without any light at all. This was especially since all of the three lines of Zer were closed off because of the wall of the vessel of the Yesod of Ima on the level of Tiferet. Therefore, there was no way for the revealed Chasadim to ascend from the end of the Yesod of Zer, Besod Or Hoser, and illuminate the first three. It should not be difficult that the Yesod of Ima descended while the Netzach and Hod remained in their original places. There are three lines, and each one is separate from the other. When Adam Harishon sinned with respect to the Keter of Zer, which is the Tiferet of Ima and the middle line, this blemish continued to the Da'at of Zer, which is the Yesod of Ima in the middle line, and they descended. But the Netzach and Hod are separate lines, and therefore the blemish did not continue on to them, so they remained in their places. The sixth blemish, the sixth blemish included two or three blemishes. Originally, the brain of Da'at was above in a very narrow place, and the five chasadim emanated first, descending through the throat, which is very narrow. Remember the throat and yesod connection, especially for women. There's a wonderful diagram. Science has proven this, but if you look, there's a diagram of the throat and the cervix, the vaginal canal, and they are strikingly similar. And in somatic health, we understand greatly the vagus nerve theory and the quality of tension that is collected or concentrated in the jaw region, affecting the tension in the pelvic floor, which can lead to things like vulvodynia, vaginismus, painful childbirth, etc. So there's a lot to be said. Again, back to what I started speaking about in the very beginning of this, about that utterance, being in that dark room, in that dark place, the choshek, and that will to create through speech, through sound, through utterance, that connection, that resonance, and that reverberance of sound that creates something to attach and connect to. And that reflection, everything is a reflection of that oneness. So we have to remember that connection between the throat and the womb. There's a mystery, and this is even in Shaar Mamre Razal, another of the Kitvei Ari, where it confirms the mystery of why woman was created with two mouths. So we have two portals of not only creation and birth, manifestation and emanation, but two portals of speech. The womb speaks. And I've worked with women on this a long time, even before coming to Torah in this capacity. You have to listen to the voice of your womb. And this society in particular works very hard to disconnect us from that voice. So often when you have issues with speech, whether it's a speech impediment, recurrent or chronic throat issues, sinus issues, this can also be connected to the state of your womb, the state of your embodiment and your femininity. Again, as we talked about in our Parsha study, where are our authentic yeses and nos? Where have we spoken up? Where have we spoken when we shouldn't have? Where have we not spoken when we should have? I digress. Originally, the brain of Da'at was above in a very narrow place, and the five Chasadim emanated first, descending through the throat, which is very narrow. Since Chasadim are the level of water, the light of Chasadim flows freely like water, they went out first and enlarged the opening. It is the nature of running water to enlarge the area through which it flows. Remember, water is also femininity, the feminine aspect, the feminine element. It is water's adaptability that is the secret of femininity. Water can carve its own path. Water, a drop of water, can even penetrate steel and stone. It expands and it contracts. It creeps through crevices and cracks. Back to our nida limud. We're putting all the pieces together. Since Kasadim are the level of water, flowing freely like water, they went out first and enlarged the opening. It is the nature of running water to enlarge the area through which it flows. Then they emanated through the body of Zer, from the chesed to the hold within him. After that, the Gevurot could find a wider opening and descend as well to the Yesod of Zer. This allowed them to give light to the Da'at of the Nukva that is standing behind Zer Ampin, opposite the back of the Yesod of Zer, as known. So when we talk about the levels of femininity, the levels of manifesting femininity, we talked about the karka'ah, the sadeh, and the house. So literally the feminine grows different levels. At some point, they are equal. The crowns are equal. But there's a level where the woman, especially as sadeh, that fertile field, that soft place where the man can penetrate, where she is built by the yesod of the masculine. So the nukva is built by the yesod of Zianapin. So her head rises only to the level of the netzach code and the yesod. And not to be too crass or graphic, but again, I myself am personally always delighted to see these intriguing ways where even in modern slang and colloquialisms, we see these types of confirmation. When we speak of certain intimate acts, we say giving brain or giving head, excuse me. But these things, it's interesting how these parallels are there. So the feminine brain, the consciousness, the mohin, the keter is built by the yesod of the masculine, the ziyarampin at that level. And it's important to say at that level because, yes, we do have the level where we are standing equal, head to head, crown to crown. But many women have to be built up to that level. And of course, we're also talking ideally, where the man is supposed to be at that higher level of consciousness to be able to give that to her to build her up. This is not always the case today. This way, Zerapin got the crown of Chasadim, where the Da'at is comprised of the two crowns, Chasadim and Gevurot. Mm. This way, Zeranpin got the crown of Chasadim, which is his portion, and the Gevurot were given to the Nukva, which is her portion. The sin stopped that. Oh, I see you have to hop off. No problem. We can actually close
It
here.
it looks like we're just about to the end, so we're it's perfect timing. We can wrap up. Looks like go to the summary.
Sure. Okay. Perfect. Yes, because class is about to start anyway. All right, wonderful. Mm, their sin stopped that. There is another purpose. Since the Hasidim were the first to leave the head of Ziarampin and the Geburot descended after that, they were sweetened with the Hasidim as they went down to the Yesod as known. This was not the case after the sin. There is a third purpose. All the Hasidim and Geburot were on the level that emanate through the body of Ziar. All of them emanate because their roots remain in the Da'at, while their branches emanate through the body. But once the Da'at brain itself goes down to a wider place between the two shoulders of Ziarampin, the Gevurot, which are burning fire and strong judgments, overpower the Chassidim and leave first. They emanate through the body of Zer, while the Chassidim remain in the Da'at and do not emanate. We will stop there. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen. Amen.
Amen.